Hi, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered. I'm your host, Pamela Price, and this is the space and the place for real talk. This podcast is all about raw, unfiltered conversations on law, politics, culture, education, systemic racism, and current events shaping our world. We'll go beyond the headlines to dive deep into how some of the most pressing issues impact real people, real families, and our communities. For those tuning in for the first time, I'm Pamela Price, a longtime attorney, political activist, and champion for justice. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel to watch the show and to my Substack to read the weekly word. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can also listen to Pamela Price Unfiltered wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to the show. Let's talk about it.
Organization that started 12 years ago because I was working in tech and I was teaching inner city kids dance, and one of my 15-year-old dance students was raped in the city of Hayward and then sold throughout California, but very heavily sold in Oakland, right off of East 14th. And this is when I had a rude awakening that this was happening to not somewhere over there to children from another place, although it is also happening to people that are being brought from across the seas. But the majority of the cases are of US-born women, children, men, girls, and boys. And it is heartbreaking, not only sex trafficking, but labor trafficking. Any violation of someone's human rights to move as they move freely and to have the liberty to say no is a atrocity committed against all of us. And for me, it wasn't something I could look away from. And so I started Love Never Fails 12 years ago. We need to get this narrative out. The intersectionality between gun violence, family violence, youth violence, and human trafficking and domestic violence is undeniable. It is time that we change the narrative and that we put the resources, as was mentioned earlier, the housing, the workforce development, the mental health services, the legal services. All of it is needed if we truly are committed to this work. And today marks a new day where we are putting a stake in the ground and saying, yes, we're going to go forward in unity with all of the things that are needed to truly create change. And for that, I'm grateful.
My guest today on Pamela Price Unfiltered is Vanessa Russell. Vanessa Russell is the executive director of Love Never Fails. Since 2011, Love Never Fails has opened 8 safe houses, which house 400 plus women, men, youth, and children impacted by human trafficking. They also reach 10,000 people annually in daily outreach activities. Vanessa Russell has developed children in dance, teaching hundreds ages 3 to 25 lyrical, flags, hip hop, and mime since 2000. In 2010, however, one of her 14-year-old dance students was sold into human trafficking. This experience with her student and her own familial history with human trafficking propelled her to launch Love Never Fails. For 30 years, Vanessa worked in leading technology and sales organizations in the IT and education industry. She retired from Cisco Systems in January of 2019 to lead Love Never Fails full-time. She is now a professor of computer science and information systems for Peralta Colleges, a pastor with ICFG, and published author of the Fight for Love workbook. Vanessa serves as vice chair of Contra Costa and Solano County Family Justice Center Board, the East Bay Interagency Council, and Thrivent Financial Pacific Sierra Board Chair. Vanessa, welcome to Pamela Price Unfiltered.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. It's my honor to have you here. I'm so amazed and grateful for the work that you do every day and that you've been doing and that you dedicated your life to, which a lot of people aren't willing to do. So thank you.
No, thank you.
So tell us about your journey from dance and tech to fighting human slavery in America.
Yeah. So, I always like to say I did not choose this. It chose me. I was just doing my tech thing, my tech job, and raising my children and teaching inner city kids dance in San Leandro. And one day, one of my 14-year-old dance students stopped coming to class. And I thought perhaps she had just lost interest. And then a few months later, someone came by and knocked on the door while I was teaching a 12-step recovery class. And they said, I have a young lady in the car, and I just thought you might be able to help me with her. And I went out to the car, and there she was. It was my student. And I was um, just crushed to hear about everything that had happened to her. And, I went and had some hot cocoa with her across the street from where I was, and she began to tell me all the horrific things that had happened to her. She had been, raped and beaten and shot at, and this was my precious little smart student that, I just never imagined would go through something like that. And I thought, even then, after we talked, I thought, you know what, we've got this handled. She's not gonna be in, doing this anymore. Now we know what's up, and we're gonna work together to get her the help and the support she needs. But, I quickly learned about things like trauma bonding that lead, CSEC, commercially sexually exploited children, back to their traffickers and their abusers. And I had to learn all that. I didn't know any of this stuff. I wasn't a teacher then. I wasn't a clinician. I was just a tech nerd, and I had no clue what I was dealing with. And, it's been quite a journey. And I just, want to say that with her, she was in and out of care 18 times that I know of. She says it was more, but during that time, in and out, in and out, in and out. And eventually we were able to get her into a program, and she was adopted by one of our volunteers, and she is now almost 30 years old, and we are so grateful that she's safe. And her life really inspired me to help more young people like her.
Wonderful. And there are so many young people like her. Every day we hear about 14, 15-year-olds found or lost
Mhm.
in
Yes.
our community.
Yeah.
And it's happening all over the world. We understand that it's $1 billion industry, and Alameda County is just a big speck on
Mhm.
the horizon of human trafficking. But can you help my audience understand, where does Oakland fit in Alameda County? Where do we fit in this process, or this huge thing that's called modern day slavery?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Oakland has been really a place where human trafficking has been on display in Alameda County. And there's cities across the Bay Area. San Francisco has what's called blades, which are streets where people are being sold. We have multiple blades in Oakland. Places where people are sold. There's, a blade in Stockton. There's one in Sacramento. There's one in on off Figueroa in LA, and they're in different areas across the state. And the consistent thing that happens, in the cities where this is occurring, is there's a correlation between that and gun violence and drug trafficking. And even now, even the OPD assistant chief did a presentation recently talking about how people who are being trafficked are actually being forced to sell drugs while they're being trafficked, because they're considered collateral damage. There's nothing, there's no value placed on their lives. And so if they want to get high with someone who's buying them, that's a perfect place to be selling their drugs. And what that means is the people that are there and that are being sold in the open market are also being shot and killed. There have been so many homicides of exploited, girls, people out there in the last couple of years. It's just become so violent in so many different ways. And many times we don't recognize that it is human trafficking related, but it is.
True. The blade expression. Many people in Oakland don't know what the blade is, but it's not a unique thing to Oakland. There are blades everywhere, but it is. I appreciate how you describe it. It's a place where human beings are sold. And
Yes.
for sex and
Yep.
for exploitation. And yeah, again, the intersectionality between drugs, guns, and sex.
That's
And
right. Yeah,
it's all a criminal enterprise, right? And it's
it really
happening
is.
right before our eyes in
Hmm.
the streets.
Yes.
Many people in Oakland go through the blade and they're shocked, right? Or people
Yeah.
from outside of Oakland, they come to the blade and they're absolutely shocked. And the first thing they want to know is, well, who are these people and how did this happen? So can you shed some perspective on that?
Yeah, well, in the case of my first student and in the case of most of those that we support, the thing that they have in common is some kind of vulnerability. And you would be surprised the different types of vulnerabilities that get exploited. Being lonely is a vulnerability, being othered in some way. Maybe you're overweight, or maybe you're in your teenage years and you have acne. Maybe you have some disability. Maybe you are LGBTQIA. Maybe you are a poor Black girl, and that unfortunately represents 40% of the cases, a poor Black girl that is living in Oakland. By the way, some of the stats are very challenging to stomach when you look at the disproportionality with Black and Latino girls that are the ones that are the most trafficked. And you would think, oh, well, are they being bought by their own community? No, they're not. They're being purchased. There were stats that were pulled together about the people that are coming to purchase them, and they're not from Oakland. They're coming in from other affluent neighborhoods across the Bay Area and state, while passing through and or coming in purposely to buy young babies that are doing nothing more than being poor. And I always like to say, actually, I borrowed this tagline from one of our staff members, Diana, who said, poverty is the biggest pimp out there. And it's really, that is what is causing people to become so vulnerable, especially in this time, where we're in a housing crisis, where there's food scarcity, where there's so many challenges in California, in the Bay Area, with the cost of living. People literally are in school. People have jobs. You go out there and you talk to the girls and you're like, so what are you doing? Would you like to get a job? They say, I have a job. I have a 40 hour. I'm trying to make ends meet. I got to make my rent. Or you'll see a lot of people out there when it's Christmas, when it's birthday time, there were a whole bunch of people out there the other day. About 80 girls were out there, and it was right before back to school. Why? Because the kids need clothes and they need book bags and they need supplies. And if you can barely make rent, then you're going to hit the blade to get that money together.
Right. And you fell into it, as you point out, by being vulnerable.
Yeah.
One of the biggest pipeline for sex trafficking is foster kids. And,
Yes.
I'm a former foster kid, so I know what it feels like when you don't feel like you belong to anybody or anywhere, and you are desperate, and you can easily be tricked or persuaded to get into that life. And yeah, it makes you very, every time I go through there, I'm like, oh God, there for the grace of God go I, because it was too easy. That's such an easy pathway. And, you don't necessarily realize that that's what that pathway actually leads to, right? Too often it does lead to death for so many girls. We had so many cases when I was in the DA's office, people being killed regularly, weekly, if not daily, on the blade. And just the violence was off the chain. And I would say that is a different phenomenon, and it probably correlates with the influx of guns into Alameda County, in the acceleration of that in the pandemic. I would want your view on it. Have you seen the violence get worse over time?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Well, and I have very strong feelings about some legislation that has happened in the last couple of years. There was a legalizing of loitering for the purpose of prostitution in 2022 with SB 357. Fortunately, that was overturned by AB 379 just recently on July 30th, World Trafficking Day. And that'll go into law on January 1st. And one of the reasons why we fought so feverishly, we being a California Survivors Coalition, fought so feverishly against that that bill and, that legalization is, we're already dealing with a very vulnerable population. Then you have things like ghost guns that are coming on the scene. Then you have, this heavy addiction to fentanyl and other, very dangerous and addictive drugs that are kind of really infused in our community. We didn't have this problem like, pre-COVID. We have a lot of new things that are going on, and it is just irresponsible when, I always like to say, if you want to talk about agency and choice and things like that, you have to make sure that people actually have choices. And for me, exploitation is a choice of no choices. It's the worst choice someone has to make in the worst possible situation. And when you have guns kind of exacerbating the danger of an environment where anybody can, I can make a 3D gun. There's 3D printers now. I can just purchase guns very easily on the street. And when you're talking about those kinds of things and mapping them into the dangers of human trafficking, and then also adding in that many of the buyers are high on drugs, they don't care about the people. We've seen, so as I said earlier, so many of our people have been shot, killed. I mean, I was asked recently, I guess it was mid last year, I was asked to identify a body that had been cut into pieces that was in a bag in Berkeley, I believe it was. I mean, one of our young ladies was found unidentifiable, burned by a sex buyer. And he just got convicted. He just got, a few days ago. But, Priscilla Castro, burned, unrecognizable by her exploiter. I mean, by a buyer who just sadistic, just had no care for her. And so guns and trafficking and all the other things that are happening in the industry right now it's a full stop for me.
So you've done amazing work along the journey, and not a very long time, and really relatively a very short time, you managed to create this premier organization. And tell us what it took to create the safe houses that you have.
Yeah, a lot of trial and error, I have to say. I don't have a background in nonprofit organization. As I mentioned, my background is in tech. I am, like you, former foster. I grew up very impoverished. I have love for education and for the arts. And I just pulled from what I had. Of course, I'm a big time believer in the Lord, and I'm praying my way all the way through. And I can't say that I had it all figured out. The first house that we did was in 2015. It was for women and children. And it was a beautiful home. We had a pristine, brand new home that we landed upon. Actually, there's a woman, Maddie Green, who goes to Allen Temple, and she told me about the home. She said, there's this property and you should go look at it. Well, so let me just go back and say, it's funny what you will do when out of love for somebody else, out of empathetic, feeling people's pain, out of seeing people suffering. I was supporting these two young ladies, and one of them was 18 and she was pregnant and she was on the blade being trafficked. And another one was had just had her baby, and her baby was 5 months old, baby Z. And one day they came to me, and we didn't have houses. We were just grassroots the very beginning. And they came to me, it was a Friday afternoon, and they were like, Miss Vanessa, we need somewhere to go. And I was like, well, we don't have any houses. And they were like, we don't have nowhere to go. We're out here on the street, nowhere to go. And so I started calling housing authority. I started calling places, trying to be resourceful, couldn't find anywhere. Finally, they were like, we found somewhere. We're going to stay with one of our grandmoms, and we'll talk to you on Monday. And I was like, all right, good. Well, I think it was Tuesday of the next week, I got a call, and they said, they had gone to somebody's house and someone had dropped the baby and the baby died. And for me, I still have his obituary. I actually was just looking at it the other day. And for me, that was it. I was done. It was over. Like I said, I got so serious. I just started begging people for money. I said, I gotta open a house. and get these girls off these streets. And I still remember I went to this one woman in San Francisco at an event, and I just walked up to her and I was like, she was very affluent. And I said, Maddie had told me about this house. And I'm going to go to the house, and if it's something that will work, would you be willing to sponsor me? And she's like, it sounds good. And I was shocked that she said sounds good. And I remember going to that house and speaking with the landlord and saying, I want to take this house. It was a 6-bedroom, like I said, brand new home. And I want to take this house, but I can't afford it. I may be able to get my hands on, I think at the time I needed like 100K. And I said, I may be able to get my hands on 50 or 75,000. And he said, I'll tell you what, I'll give it to you for 75K. And he said, I don't even know why I'm doing this. He gave it to me $24,000 less than he was advertising it for per year. I went back to that philanthropic woman, and she literally wrote me a check, personal check, $75,000 just handed. I had never had anybody do something like that. So, and I was running in affluent circles, but just to write a $75,000 check, I was blown away, right? So I took it, I handed it over to him. That paid for my lease for the year. I told a bunch of women, I said, look, I don't have money to pay you. Would you be willing to volunteer until I fundraise enough for you to come on? Sure. Then I told everybody, hey, we need to furnish this place. And let me tell you, because I come from such poverty, we were on welfare, we had government cheese, we had all that good stuff. And I would have put anything in there, any kind of furniture, any kind of junky, this and that, just to get people off the street. I would have thrown it together. But let me tell you, the people bought Pottery Barn stuff, that we had ottomans and leather couches and beautiful bunk beds, brand new, nothing used, china closets. And I was just blown away. I believe it was 9 weeks. I always get mixed up if it was 9 or 12, but it was such a short period of time from the moment that he passed away to us opening that house. It just happened like that. And once that first day that we opened up, every single bed was filled. The
Wow.
first day, every single bed is filled. And now we have 49 beds, and we have 4 of the 49, we have 5 open right now. So it stays full, and it's such a community effort. We have art therapy, we have tech academy training, we have beautiful case managers and counselors and nutritionists coming in, and so many people volunteer, and dance classes. It's mind-blowing. It's taken on a life of its own. I mean, I don't know half of the people, everyone's background check, but I don't know them personally. Whereas in the beginning, I was handpicking everyone and calling all my friends, would be with the ladies, but now it's just a community expression of love. And we house women and their children, or women that are single, women that are pregnant. We've had given birth to many, many babies, many, many babies. And so that's because of Baby Z. That was, I said, that there has to be a place where women that are pregnant or women with babies can go. So we have that. Then we opened up a house for girls ages 11 to 17. Also out of necessity, we got a call during COVID. Another 15-year-old young lady was being in the custody of Vallejo PD. It was a Sunday night. All the shelters were closed because of COVID, except for Dreamcatchers. And I went and picked her up, and I brought her to Dreamcatchers, and Dreamcatchers said, you got 90 days. You don't pick her up in 90 days. And usually it was 30, but they gave me 90 because they had an extension with COVID. And they said, you don't pick her up in 90 days. I don't know that we can hold her. So I said, I got 90 days to open up. It's always like that. It's always a dire need. Our men's hope, we have a home for parolees where we house, men that are on parole. And why do we do that? I got a call from a business owner that had that house open, and she said, I'm going to go out of business. I can't keep it open anymore. And I went over there and I saw the men, and I saw that they were going to be put on the street. And I said, these, and I had a bias. I was really focused on just working with the ladies, but I thought, if I'm really going to be about it, how am I going to put these men in the street? Because they could become traffickers. They could become buyers. They could become all kinds of things, or trafficked. they could be have all kinds of negative experiences because of their background of being, system impacted. So I decided to take on that house. And that's just kind of it's always because of the humanity of the people that are in there. And me seeing them as somebody's son, somebody's daughter. And I wouldn't want my children out there like that. So, here we are.
That's so important. And that is what drives the compassion that drives us to serve humanity. We kept trying to instill in the DA's office, these are people, and we're here to serve them as people, wherever they fall on the spectrum, however they got here. This is somebody's baby, somebody's son, somebody's daughter, the one that committed the most heinous crime, and certainly the mother who lost her loved one, right? And the family that is grieving, that they deserve compassion. We have to be able to do that. And clearly that's what has moved you, and you've been a blessing to so many people. So,
Try. Thank you.
yes, of course. So I want to thank you for coming to Pamela Price Unfiltered and sharing with us just a little bit about the work that you're doing. We have to have you come back because this is
Yes.
such a pressing issue in our community. And there's so much work to be done to address it and to hopefully end modern day slavery, certainly in Alameda County and everywhere. So thank you, Vanessa, for all.
Oh, thank you.
I
I
am
appreciate it.
such a fan of Love Never Fails.
Yes. Thank you for your support. Appreciate it.
Of course. Welcome to Legally Speaking. The California legislature passes and creates or changes a law. How the law gets enforced, however, is what actually makes the law. There's a huge difference between legislation and enforcement. One example is Senate Bill 357, which was passed as Safer Streets for All Act. It was intended to stop the harassment and overcriminalization of Black and trans people by police in the human trafficking field. It was feared that the enforcement of the law was targeting Black and trans people. SB 357 took effect on January 1st, 2023, amid great concerns by anti-human trafficking advocates. There was a huge debate on the pros and cons of SB 357 before and after it passed. Opponents feared that pimps and traffickers would be able to escape police scrutiny of their activities. SB 357 also took police off their game. The Peace Officers Research Association of California, known as PORAC, heavily criticized the bill and fought against it. Most police departments simply did not know how to operate in the changed environment where they could not just harass and arrest anyone they suspected of trafficking. Law enforcement activists immediately began attacking the law instead of developing new tactics to address the traffickers whom they claim were emboldened by the law. The Oakland Police Department in particular also completely failed to focus on the increasing gun violence associated with human trafficking in our city. On July 19, 2023, Nicole Marcy, a beautiful 26-year-old mother of two, was chased down on East 14th Street, known as the Blade, onto 18th Avenue by a masked man in the early morning hours. Witnesses reported that when Nicole tripped and fell, the man stood over her and shot her multiple times. Victor Sledge was arrested and accused of shooting Nicole and another man, allegedly because Nicole refused to allow Mr. Sledge to continue trafficking her. There were 4 homicides that day in Oakland, and Nicole Marcy's death seemed to be just another homicide in Oakland. However, my team and I refused to let Nicole's murder be just another homicide in Oakland. In January of 2024, we organized a rally and march to raise awareness about human trafficking in the San Antonio neighborhood, and we walked in honor of her memory. Nicole's family attended the rally, and we were able to comfort them. They got to meet the amazing members of the DA's Human Exploitation Assistance and Response Team, known as the HEART Team. This was the HEART Team which we formed in the wake of Nicole's murder. The challenge in every community is who is best suited to address sex trafficking and what actually works. Locally, The battle is led by the FBI, which sponsors rescue raids and sting operations in collaboration with local law enforcement agencies, including local police and the sheriff's office. Federal penalties for sex trafficking are much harsher than state laws and are extremely serious when they involve minors or they're coupled with weapons possession charges. These operations are usually targeted towards street-level trafficking. The city of Oakland's response to SB 357 was to add more cameras in particular neighborhoods and enhance OPD patrols. Due to staffing issues inside OPD, however, these enhanced patrols did not have a meaningful effect on human trafficking in our city. In fact, the activity caught by the cameras intensified, and the street interactions around sex trafficking became even more violent in 2023. Many sex brothels operate openly in Alameda County, almost without any type of law enforcement apprehension. The investigation and prosecution of brothels is rare because of the time-intensive nature of the investigation. In California, victims are trafficked up and down the I-5 corridor, which includes Redding, Sacramento, Fresno, Bakersfield, Los Angeles, and San Diego. There is a larger national circuit that includes Las Vegas, Dallas, New Orleans, St. Louis, Miami, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York City, Boston, Phoenix, Detroit, Chicago, Seattle, and Portland. Alameda County sits right in the middle of the Bay Area and statewide track. According to a 2013 Department of Justice study nationally, 40% of sex trafficking victims were Black, 23.9% were Hispanic, and 4.3% were Asian. The primary victims of sex trafficking in Alameda County are Black and brown girls, 76%, of which 61% are African American and 15% are Latina. More than 55% of the trafficking victims in Alameda County were foster youth at one point in their lifetime. Culturally competent providers are key to reaching out to victims and serving their needs. Human trafficking victims often do not trust the police or the prosecutors. One of the initiatives I championed as Alameda County District Attorney was to hire a more diverse cohort of victim advocates to serve our victims of sex trafficking. We also started training prosecutors how to engage victims without demeaning them. It is rare to see a response from law enforcement that has a positive and effective impact on the whole community or solves the problem of human trafficking. SB 14 was passed in 2024, which makes human trafficking of a minor a serious felony, including for purposes of the three strikes law. It restricts the prosecutor's ability to engage in plea bargaining of these charges. In January of 2026 is when it will take effect. Also passed in 2024 and signed by the governor are four other bills. Senate Bill 963, which requires emergency room at hospitals to adopt and implement policies that allow emergency room patients to confidentially self-identify themselves to hospital personnel as a victim of sex trafficking or domestic violence. Shout out to Highland Hospital in Oakland, which is leading the way and is already focused on the need to identify victims and support victims of human trafficking seeking medical care. SB 1414 increases penalties for the crime of solicitation of a minor who is being trafficked and increases the number of people convicted of this crime who must register as sex offenders. Assembly Bill 2020 requires law enforcement agencies and the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, POST, to create minimum guidelines for law enforcement personnel when interacting with survivors of human trafficking. AB 1888 establishes a new labor trafficking unit within the California Department of Justice and requires coordination with various state departments and law enforcement agencies to refer complaints or reports of labor trafficking for investigation, prosecution, and a tracking system to collect labor trafficking reports and complaints. Assembly Bill 379 has passed, and it is intended and effective to overturn SB 357. It's an effort to turn the clock back to give police more predatory tools and encourage them to be more aggressive in combating street-level prostitution. AB 379 will also punish buyers purchasing commercial sex, making it a misdemeanor with a $1,000 fine. The money from these fines is supposed to go to community-based organizations to provide direct services and outreach to sex trafficking victims. Passing the legislation is one thing. How it gets enforced is what challenges every community. Getting the money from the court to a community-based organization will be one of the biggest challenges. In fact, the Mercury News reported last week that Judge Thomas Rearton released a man the same day he was charged with 5 felonies for sexual abuse of a 14-year-old girl. The young girl met him on Perp, a social media app geared toward teens, and he allegedly lured her to Oakland. The crime apparently was not considered serious enough for the court to hold him in the Santa Rita County Jail. So you see, we have a long way to go in fighting human trafficking, which is nothing more than modern-day slavery. But we must continue to strive to combat it and to end it. Thanks for tuning in to Pamela Price Unfiltered. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And please sign up this month as a founding member or a paid subscriber to my Substack newsletter to get the weekly word from Pamela Price Unfiltered. Your support keeps the conversation raw and unfiltered. And you can also listen to Pamela Price Unfiltered wherever you get your podcasts. I don't know that